My name is Carter Morgantown, and 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life meant. I was wrong about everything. I'm a petroleum engineer, specializing in offshore drilling operations. It's dangerous work that takes me away from home for months at a time, but the money is exceptional. My wife Celeste and I had dreams, a big house, kids, maybe a cabin by the lake for retirement. Everything I did was for our future together. 6 months ago, I accepted what was supposed to be a year-long assignment in Alaska. The company was developing a new extraction site in one of the most remote locations imaginable. The isolation was brutal. No cell service, limited internet, and only satellite phone calls once a week if weather permitted. But they were paying double my usual rate, plus bonuses for early completion. Celeste wasn't happy about me leaving for so long. We'd been married 5 years, and while she was used to my assignments, this was the longest we'd ever been apart. The night before I left our home in suburban Houston, she cried in my arms. "A whole year, Carter. What if something happens? What if I need you?" "Hey," I whispered, stroking her auburn hair. "Nothing's going to happen. And if it does, the company has emergency protocols. I can be home in 48 hours if necessary." She looked up at me with those green eyes that had captivated me since college. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll start trying for a baby when you get back. I'll be 28 soon, and I don't want to wait anymore." I kissed her forehead. "I promise. When I come home, we'll start our family." That promise kept me going through the brutal Alaskan winter. Working 16-hour days in temperatures that could kill you in minutes, I dreamed about coming home to Celeste and beginning the next chapter of our lives. Our communication was limited, but consistent. Every Sunday, when the satellite connection was strong enough, we'd video chat for an hour. She'd show me around the house, tell me about her beauty salon business, gossip about our friends. I'd tell her about the project, the crazy weather, my co-workers. Normal couple stuff. But looking back now, I realized there were signs. Small things that didn't register at the time. Sometimes she seemed distracted during our calls. A few times, I heard voices in the background that she'd dismiss as just the TV. Once, I swear I heard a man's voice, but when I asked about it, she said her neighbor Preston was helping fix a leaky faucet. 3 weeks ago, our team hit a major breakthrough. What we'd expected to take another 6 months was suddenly within reach. I volunteered for every overtime shift, worked through snowstorms, pushed harder than I'd ever pushed in my life. If we could finish early, I could surprise Celeste and come home for her 28th birthday next month. "You sure about this, Carter?" asked my supervisor, Miguel Santos. "Your wife knows you're coming home early?" "That's the point," I grinned. "It's a surprise. She thinks I'll be gone until December." Man, I hope my wife would be that excited if I showed up 6 months early. She'd probably think I got fired. We finished the project on a Wednesday. I was on a plane Thursday morning, exhausted but exhilarated. The whole flight home, I couldn't stop smiling. I imagined Celeste's face when I walked through the door. Maybe we could start trying for that baby right away. The plane landed in Houston at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday evening. I took a cab straight from the airport, too eager to wait for a rental car. The familiar sights of our neighborhood filled me with warmth. Tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, the kind of middle-class American dream that my paycheck made possible. Our house came into view, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters that we'd bought 3 years ago. It was our pride and joy, stretching our budget to its limit, but worth every penny. I'd put down 40% from my savings and taken a mortgage for the rest, all in my name since my credit was better. But something was off. There were cars everywhere, lining our driveway, parked along the street in front of our house. Lots of cars. Music was playing, and through the windows, I could see the warm glow of what looked like a party. My first thought was that Celeste was throwing one of her girls' nights. She loved entertaining, and I'd been gone so long, maybe she was celebrating something with her friends. I smiled, imagining how excited she'd be when I crashed the party. I paid the cab driver and grabbed my duffel bag. The front door was unlocked, typical during parties, so I let myself in quietly, planning to surprise everyone. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't just any party. Pink and blue balloons filled the foyer. Streamers hung from the ceiling. A banner stretched across the living room entrance reading, "Welcome Baby Morgantown," in glittery letters. My heart stopped. Baby Morgantown? Celeste was pregnant? But she hadn't said anything during our calls. When had she found out? How far along was she? My mind raced with questions as I dropped my bag and walked toward the living room. What I saw next shattered my world completely. Celeste sat in the center of the room in a decorated chair, clearly pregnant, not just a little pregnant, but very visibly pregnant. Her normally flat stomach was rounded under a flowing pink dress. She was glowing, radiant, surrounded by open presents and cooing friends. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was my younger brother Blake, 26 years old, kneeling beside her chair with his hand on her belly. As I watched in frozen horror, he leaned over and kissed her temple, whispering something that made her laugh. The room was full of people I knew intimately. My parents, Vernon and Patricia Morgantown. Celeste's parents, Richard and Veronica Sterling. Our friends from church. Our neighbors. Everyone was watching Blake and Celeste with warm smiles, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. It was my mother who noticed me first. The smile froze on her face, and she went pale as she saw me standing in the doorway. "Carter," she gasped, loud enough that the music seemed to stop. Every head in the room turned toward me. The conversation died instantly. Celeste's eyes went wide with what looked like terror. Blake jerked his hand away from her stomach and stood up so fast he nearly knocked over a side table. "Surprise," I said quietly, though I'm not sure anyone heard me. "Carter, oh my God, you're home early." Celeste struggled to get up from the chair, but her pregnancy made her movements awkward. "I can explain everything." "Can you?" I asked, my voice still eerily calm. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is pregnant with my brother's baby, and everyone in this room knew about it except me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. Someone's ice was melting in their drink. Blake stepped forward, his hands raised like he was approaching a dangerous animal. "Carter, man, let's talk about this privately." "Privately?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "It seems like privacy is something I wasn't entitled to." "How long?" "How long what?" Celeste whispered. "How long have you been sleeping with my brother?" My father stood up from the couch. "Son, there's no need for this kind of language in front of." "In front of who, Dad?" "In front of my wife's baby shower guests." "The baby shower for the child she's carrying that isn't mine." I looked around the room at all these familiar faces. "How long have all of you known?" My mother spoke up, her voice trembling. "Carter, we only found out last month. Celeste wanted to tell you herself when you came home." "Last month," I repeated. "And when exactly were you planning to tell me?" "When the baby was born. When it started calling Blake Daddy?" Celeste finally managed to stand, and I could see just how pregnant she was. At least 6 months, maybe 7. "Carter, please, let's go upstairs and talk alone." "No," I said firmly. "I've been alone for 6 months, while you've all been playing happy family. If we're going to have this conversation, we're having it right here, right now, in front of everyone who knew the truth while I was working my rear end off in Alaska thinking about coming home to my wife." Blake ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Carter, it wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Blake? Walk me through the plan here." "There was no plan," Celeste interjected. It happened. I was lonely, and Blake was helping around the house, and..." "When?" I cut her off. "When did it start?" She looked at Blake, then back at me. "About a month after you left." "A month?" I'd been gone 1 month, working in sub-zero temperatures, living in a prefab cabin with 5 other guys, counting down the days until I could come home to my wife, and she was already sleeping with my brother. "And the baby?" I asked. "Carter," my mother said softly, "maybe we should." "The baby, Celeste. When did you get pregnant?" She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. 3 months ago." 3 months. So she'd been having an affair for 3 months before getting pregnant. I did quick math in my head. She was about 6 months along, which meant she'd gotten pregnant right around the time we'd had that conversation about starting our family. "Did you know?" I asked Blake. "When you were sleeping with her, did you know we were trying to have a baby?" Blake's face was red. Whether from shame or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. "Carter, it's not that simple. It's a yes or no question, Blake. Did you know?" "Yes," he whispered. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they betrayed me, but they'd betrayed the dream Celeste and I had shared. The family we'd planned to build together. I looked around the room again. Anyone else want to share some truth? Any other surprises I should know about? Our neighbor Preston cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Carter, maybe I should go. This is a family matter." "No, Preston, stay," I said. "You're practically family anyway. You've been coming around the house a lot while I was gone, haven't you? Helping with repairs and such." Preston's wife, Linda, looked confused. Preston's been working overtime for months. He's hardly been home, let alone. She stopped mid-sentence as she realized what I was implying. Oh no, Preston said quickly. Carter, I swear on my children's lives I never. Relax, Preston, I said. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just trying to figure out who knew what and when. I turned to our friend Marcus, who was standing awkwardly by the gift table. Marcus, you knew, didn't you? Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Carter, man, I only suspected. I never knew for sure. But you suspected, and you never thought to mention it to me during any of our calls. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Carter, I think your wife might be cheating on you with your brother, but I'm not sure. You were thousands of miles away. What could you have done? He had a point, but it didn't make me feel any better. Celeste's mother, Veronica, finally spoke up. Carter, dear, I know this is shocking, but these things happen. The important thing now is the baby. That innocent child needs. Needs what? I interrupted. Needs a father? Because it has one. Its father is standing right there. I pointed at Blake, who looked like he was going to be sick. Carter, my father tried again. Why don't you come stay with us tonight? Give everyone time to cool down, and we can discuss this rationally tomorrow. Rationally? I laughed again. Dad, what's rational about any of this? My wife is 6 months pregnant with my brother's baby, and everyone in this room has been lying to me for months. There's nothing rational to discuss. I picked up my duffel bag from where I'd dropped it. You know what? You're all right about one thing. I shouldn't be here. This isn't my party. This isn't my baby. And apparently, this isn't my family anymore. Carter, please. Celeste reached out to me, but I stepped back. Enjoy your baby shower, Celeste. Enjoy your new family. I'll be in touch through my lawyer. The walk to the front door felt like the longest walk of my life. Behind me, I could hear voices, Celeste crying, my mother calling my name, Blake saying something I couldn't make out. But I didn't turn around. I walked out of that house, out of that life, and I didn't look back. I stood on the front lawn for a moment, looking up at the house that had represented everything I'd worked for. The American dream. Security. Home. Family. It all felt like a lie now. My phone started buzzing, Celeste calling. I declined the call and called for an Uber instead. While I waited, I looked through the living room window one more time. The party was clearly over. People were gathering their things, offering awkward hugs to Celeste, avoiding eye contact with Blake. My parents were still there, along with Celeste's parents, all of them looking like they were in crisis mode. The Uber arrived before I could change my mind about anything. I gave the driver the address of a hotel downtown and settled in for the ride. As we pulled away from the curb, I saw Blake come out of the house and start walking toward the car, but it was too late. We were already moving. The next few days were a blur. I checked into the Marriott downtown and tried to process what had happened. My phone rang constantly. Celeste, Blake, my parents, even some of the people who'd been at the party. I ignored most of the calls, but eventually, I answered one from my mother. Carter, honey, please come home. We need to talk about this as a family. Family? I said. Mom, Blake slept with my wife and got her pregnant. What part of that says family to you? Mistakes happen, sweetheart. People make bad choices. But we're still family, and we love you. Did you love me when you decided to keep this secret? Did you love me when you sat in that room celebrating my brother's baby with my wife? We were trying to protect you. You were so far away, and there was nothing you could have done. I could have come home. I could have dealt with this 6 months ago instead of finding out at a baby shower. And what would you have done? Thrown away your career? Lost all that money? Her question hit me harder than I expected. Would I have thrown it all away? The honest answer was probably not. I would have been devastated, but I probably would have tried to work it out with Celeste. I might have even convinced myself that Blake was just a mistake, that our marriage could survive it. But a baby changed everything. A baby made it permanent. A baby meant they'd created something together that would tie them to each other forever. I need time to think, I told my mother. Don't call me for a while. Carter. I hung up. That evening, Blake showed up at the hotel. Hotel security called my room to ask if I wanted to see him. Send him up, I said. It was time to hear what he had to say for himself. When he knocked on my door, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was messy, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd worn to the baby shower. Can I come in? I stepped aside and let him enter. He sat heavily in the desk chair while I remained standing by the window. You look terrible, I observed. I feel terrible. Carter, I need you to know. Know what? That you're sorry? That it didn't mean anything? That you never meant for this to happen? All of that's true, but you kept doing it for 5 months anyway. He was quiet for a long moment. Yes. At least he wasn't trying to make excuses. Why? I asked. Just why? You could have had anyone. You're 26, single, good-looking. Why my wife? Blake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Because she was there. Because she was lonely. Because I was lonely too, and it was easy. Easy, I repeated. Destroying my marriage was easy. I didn't think of it that way at first. It started so gradually. She'd call me to help with little things around the house. Fix a squeaky door, change a light bulb she couldn't reach. You know how she is. She hates asking for help, but with you gone. So you helped her with household repairs and ended up in bed with her. Not right away. At first, it really was just helping out. But she was so sad, Carter. She cried a lot those first few months after you left. She'd make dinner for 2 out of habit, then realize you weren't there to eat it. She'd buy tickets to movies thinking she'd go with you, then remember you were in Alaska. And you comforted her. I tried to, as a friend, as your brother who cared about her too. But somewhere along the way, you fell in love with her. Blake looked up at me surprised. How did you know? Because you wouldn't have stayed for 5 months otherwise. You're not the type for meaningless affairs. You've always been the romantic one. He nodded slowly. I did fall in love with her, and I think she fell in love with me too. That hurt worse than anything else he could have said. I could have handled lust, could have handled loneliness, could have handled a mistake. But love meant this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a replacement. Does she love you more than she loves me? I asked. Blake was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally he said, I don't know. I think she loves us both in different ways. That's not how marriage works, Blake. I know. God, Carter, I know. If I could take it all back. But you can't. And even if you could, would you really? Would you give up being in love with her? Would you give up that baby? He looked down at his hands. No, I don't think I would. I had to give him credit for honesty. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. She wants to try to work things out with you. She thinks maybe you could forgive her, maybe even help raise the baby. I stared at him. She thinks I might help raise your child? She's scared, Carter. She knows she messed up, but she doesn't want to lose you completely. Well, she has. She's lost me completely. And me? Have you lost me too? I looked at my little brother, the kid I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, defended from bullies at school. The man who'd been the best man at my wedding. Yeah, Blake, I've lost you too. He started crying then, quietly but genuinely. I never wanted this to happen. But it did happen. And now we all have to live with the consequences. He stood up to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than I've ever been about anything in my life. I believe you, I said. But sorry doesn't fix this. After he left, I sat in that hotel room and tried to figure out what to do next. I could go back to Alaska. They'd probably let me finish out the original contract. I could find work somewhere else entirely, maybe overseas. Or I could stay and fight for what was left of my life here. But what was left? A house full of memories that were now tainted. Friends who had lied to me. Parents who had chosen sides without telling me. A wife who was carrying another man's baby. The next morning, I called my company's HR department. I need to speak to someone about family leave policies. Of course, Mr. Morgantown. Are you looking to extend your current leave? No, I'm looking to understand what happens if I need to take time to handle a divorce. There was a pause. I see. Well, we do have provisions for that. How much time do you think you'll need? I don't know yet. Maybe a few months. That shouldn't be a problem. Your performance on the Alaska project was exceptional. We'd be happy to accommodate whatever you need. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. Consulting with a divorce attorney. The lawyer's name was Robert Chambers, and he came highly recommended. His office was in downtown Houston, all leather chairs and law books, and the kind of intimidating atmosphere that probably cost his clients a fortune. Tell me what happened, he said after I'd settled into a chair across from his massive desk. I told him everything from the beginning. He listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. And you said the house is in your name only? Yes. I bought it before we were married, but I've paid for all the improvements, the mortgage, everything. What about her business? She owns a beauty salon, but I invested $50,000 to help her get it started. Any joint accounts? Yes, but I contribute about 90% of the money. Children together? No. He set down his pen. Mr. Morgantown, this is actually a fairly straightforward case from a legal standpoint. Since the house predates your marriage and remains in your name, you should be able to keep it. The business investment complicates things slightly, but we can work with that. The joint accounts will need to be divided, but given your contribution level, you'll retain most of those assets. What about alimony? Texas isn't particularly generous with alimony, especially in cases involving adultery. If we can prove the affair, which it sounds like we can, spousal support becomes much less likely. And what about her? What happens to Celeste? That's not really your concern anymore, Mr. Morgantown. Your job now is to protect yourself and your assets. As I walked out of that law office, I felt something I hadn't expected, sadness. Not for myself, but for Celeste. In a few months, she'd be a single mother with a failed business and nowhere to live. Part of me, the part that had loved her for 7 years, wanted to protect her from that. But the larger part of me, the part that had been betrayed and humiliated, wanted her to face the consequences of her choices. That evening, Celeste called again. This time I answered. Carter, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know. I wasn't ready to talk. Are you ready now? I think so. Can we meet? Somewhere neutral, away from everyone else. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near downtown. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The pregnancy was even more obvious in the afternoon light, and I found myself wondering if the baby was a boy or a girl, whether it would look like Blake or like her. You look tired, she said as I sat down across from her. I haven't been sleeping well. Me neither. She paused. Carter, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. I've heard that from everyone involved. It seems like a lot of things that nobody meant to happen actually happened anyway. I know you're angry. I'm beyond angry, Celeste. I'm devastated. I'm humiliated. I feel like the last 7 years of my life were built on a foundation of lies. They weren't. Carter, I loved you. I still love you. But you love Blake too. She didn't deny it, which was somehow worse than if she had. It's possible to love 2 people, she said quietly. Maybe it is. But it's not possible to be married to both of them. We sat in silence for a while, watching other people come and go. Normal people with normal problems, probably. People whose biggest worry was getting to work on time or remembering to pick up milk at the store. What do you want from me? I finally asked. I want you to forgive me. I want us to try to work this out. I know it seems impossible now, but people do survive infidelity. People rebuild their marriages. What about the baby? We could raise it together. Lots of men raise children who aren't biologically theirs. I looked at her in disbelief. You want me to raise Blake's child? I want you to raise our child. The child of the woman you love. The woman I loved, I corrected. Past tense. Her eyes filled with tears. Don't say that. Celeste, you're carrying my brother's baby. Every day for the rest of that child's life, I'd be reminded of what you did. Every time I looked at him or her, I'd see Blake. I'd see the betrayal. I'd see the fact that you chose someone else over me. I didn't choose Blake over you. I chose Blake in addition to you. That's not how marriage works. My voice had gotten louder, and other customers were starting to look at us. I lowered it and leaned across the table. Marriage is supposed to mean something, Celeste. It's supposed to mean that no matter how lonely you get, no matter how tempted you are, you choose your spouse. You chose Blake. For 5 months, every single day, you chose Blake. And I regret it. God, Carter, I regret it so much. But you don't regret the baby. She put her hand on her stomach protectively. No, I don't regret the baby. Then you don't really regret it at all. You regret that I found out, but you don't regret doing it. I stood up from the table. I've hired a lawyer, Celeste. You'll be hearing from him soon. Carter, please. It's over. Whatever we had, whatever we were, it's over. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking everything I'm legally entitled to take. Which, according to my attorney, is most of it. I left her sitting in that coffee shop, one hand on her pregnant belly, tears streaming down her face. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Texas has something called a no-fault divorce option, but given the circumstances, we were able to prove adultery, which worked in my favor. Celeste didn't contest the divorce or the asset division, which surprised me. She knows she's wrong, Robert explained during one of our meetings, and she knows she doesn't have a leg to stand on legally. Her best bet is to cooperate and hope you feel generous. But I wasn't feeling generous. I was feeling betrayed, and I wanted everyone involved to understand that actions have consequences. The house sold quickly. Apparently, the market was hot for colonial-style homes in our neighborhood. After paying off the remaining mortgage, I netted about $180,000. Celeste's share of our joint assets came to about $30,000 after lawyers' fees and other expenses. The beauty salon had to be sold to pay me back my investment, leaving her with essentially nothing. She's going to be homeless and broke with a newborn baby, my mother said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. Is that really what you want? What I wanted was a faithful wife, I replied. What I got was a cheating wife and a lying family. Celeste made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. And Blake? Are you going to punish him forever too? I'm not punishing anyone, Mom. I'm just not rewarding them. There's a difference. The truth was, I barely thought about Blake anymore. The anger I'd felt toward him had faded into something more like indifference. He was my brother, and some part of me would always love him, but he was no longer someone I could trust or want in my life. 2 weeks before the divorce was finalized, I got a call from my company offering me a position as a project manager on a new development in Norway. 2-year contract, excellent pay, full relocation package. It felt like a sign. Norway, my father asked when I told him about the job. That's awfully far away. That's the point, Dad. What if we need you? What if there's an emergency? You managed fine without me for the 6 months I was in Alaska. I'm sure you'll manage fine without me in Norway. This is different, and you know it. He was right. This was different. This was permanent. I spent my last week in Houston tying up loose ends and saying goodbye to the few friends who had remained loyal throughout the whole mess. Most people had chosen sides, and unfortunately, most had chosen Celeste's side. Apparently, a pregnant woman was more sympathetic than a betrayed husband. The night before my flight to Oslo, I drove past our old house one more time. The new owners had already moved in. There were different cars in the driveway, different curtains in the windows. It looked like a happy family home again. I hoped they'd have better luck in it than Celeste and I had. As I sat there in my rental car, looking at what used to be my life, my phone rang. It was Blake. Carter, I heard you're leaving tomorrow. That's right. I wanted to call and, I don't know, say goodbye, I guess. Goodbye, Blake. Wait, don't hang up. Please. I need to tell you something. I waited. Celeste had the baby last week. A little girl. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Healthy. I felt an unexpected pang at the news. Despite everything, the idea of new life being born was still somehow moving. That's good, I said. I'm glad she's healthy. We named her Hope. Hope is a nice name. Carter, I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I'm going to take care of them. Both of them. I'm going to be the father this little girl deserves, and I'm going to take care of Celeste too. Good. That's your responsibility now. And I want you to know that I'll never stop regretting what happened. What I did to you, to our family. I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I hope someday you can at least understand that I never meant to hurt you. I do understand that, Blake, but understanding doesn't change anything. Will you ever come back? To visit, I mean. I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe someday, but not anytime soon. I miss you already. I miss the brother I thought I had, the one who would never do what you did. I'm still that brother, Carter. I just made a terrible mistake. No, Blake. That brother wouldn't have made that mistake. That brother would have told me the truth from the beginning. That brother would have put family loyalty above everything else. I don't know who you are anymore, but you're not the brother I grew up with. I hung up before he could respond. The flight to Oslo was long and gave me plenty of time to think about what I was leaving behind and what I was moving toward. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope myself. Not the desperate hope of wanting to fix something broken, but the calm hope of starting fresh. Norway was everything I'd hoped it would be. Clean air, stunning landscapes, and people who didn't know my story or judge me for my choices. The work was challenging and engaging, and my colleagues were professional and friendly without being intrusive. I bought a small apartment in Bergen with a view of the mountains. I learned to ski, took up hiking, even tried my hand at Norwegian cooking. For the first time in years, I was living for myself instead of for someone else's idea of what my life should be. 6 months into my Norwegian adventure, I got an email from my mother with news from home. Blake and Celeste had broken up. Apparently, the stress of caring for a newborn, combined with their guilt over how their relationship had started, had been too much for them. Celeste had moved back in with her parents, and Blake had relocated to California for work. The irony wasn't lost on me. They destroyed my marriage for a love that couldn't even survive the consequences of their actions. But instead of feeling vindicated or satisfied, I just felt sad. Sad for little Hope, who would grow up in a broken family. Sad for Celeste, who had lost everything chasing something that turned out to be an illusion. Even sad for Blake, who had sacrificed his relationship with his older brother for a woman who ultimately couldn't commit to him either. I never responded to my mother's email. What was there to say? A year later, I met Ingrid. She was a Norwegian engineer working on sustainable energy projects, brilliant and beautiful, and completely uninterested in my past. We took things slowly, building a relationship based on who we were in the present rather than who we'd been before. When I finally told her about Celeste and Blake and everything that had happened in Texas, she listened without judgment. "That must have been very painful," she said simply. "It was, but it also taught me something important." "What's that?" "That love isn't enough. Trust is more important. Loyalty is more important. Respect is more important. Love without those things is just a feeling, and feelings fade. And do you think you can trust again?" I looked at her, this amazing woman who had entered my life when I thought I might never trust anyone again. "I'm learning to," I said, "with the right person." 2 years into my Norwegian contract, something unexpected happened. I received a package from Texas with no return address. Inside was a letter from Celeste and a photograph. The letter was brief. "Carter, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you throw this away without reading it. But I wanted you to know that Hope is walking now, and she's the most beautiful, smart, funny little girl you could imagine. I also wanted you to know that I've been in therapy for the past year, working through everything that happened and trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to try to justify what I did. I'm writing to apologize truly and completely for the pain I caused you. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect, and I failed to give you any of those things. I hope you found happiness wherever you are. I hope you found someone who treats you the way you should be treated. And I hope that someday you can think of our good times together without the pain of how it ended. I will always love you, Carter, in the way you love someone who is fundamentally important to your life, even when you can't be with them anymore. Take care of yourself. Celeste. P.S. I thought you might want to see what Hope looks like. She has Blake's eyes, but your smile, strangely enough. Maybe we were all more connected than we realized. Asterisk. The photograph showed a toddler with dark hair and bright blue eyes, grinning at the camera while sitting in a pile of autumn leaves. She was beautiful, and Celeste was right. There was something about her smile that reminded me of myself at that age. I sat in my Norwegian apartment, holding that picture and feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Sadness for what could have been, anger at what was taken from me, but also, surprisingly, a kind of peace. The sharp edges of my pain had worn smooth over the years, and what remained was more like a scar than an open wound. I never wrote back to Celeste, but I didn't throw the picture away either. I put it in a drawer in my desk, along with a few other mementos from my old life. Not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because I didn't want to forget the lessons. 3 months later, Ingrid and I got engaged. We planned a simple wedding in Bergen, with just our closest friends and her family. I thought about inviting my parents, maybe even Blake, but ultimately decided against it. This was my new life, and I wanted to keep it separate from the old one. The night before our wedding, Ingrid found me on our balcony, looking out at the fjords. "Second thoughts?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "Never," I said. "Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 5 years ago." "Better or worse?" I turned in her arms to face her. "Infinitely better, because it's built on truth instead of lies. Because it's built with someone I can trust completely." "And how do you know you can trust me completely?" It was a fair question. How could anyone ever know that for certain? Because of how you've acted since the day I met you. Because you've never given me a reason to doubt you. Because when you say something, you mean it. Because you chose me every day, not just when it was convenient or easy. She smiled. "Those are good reasons. They're the only reasons that matter." Our wedding was perfect, small, intimate, honest. Everything my first wedding had pretended to be but wasn't. When I said my vows to Ingrid, I meant every word, and I knew she did too. 5 years have passed since then. Ingrid and I have built a life together that's grounded in reality instead of fantasy. We've traveled, bought a house, started talking about children. We've had arguments and reconciliations, tough times and celebrations, all the normal ups and downs of a real relationship. Sometimes people ask me if I regret leaving America, if I miss my family, if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed and tried to work things out with Celeste. The honest answer is no. I don't regret any of it. The betrayal was devastating at the time, but it taught me what I actually needed in a partner and in a life. It taught me the difference between love and infatuation, between commitment and convenience, between family and people who happen to share your DNA. Last month, I got a call from my mother telling me that my father had been diagnosed with cancer. The prognosis was good, they'd caught it early, and treatment was already underway. But it made me think about whether it was time to bridge some of the gaps I'd created. "Would you consider coming home for a visit?" she asked. "I know your father would love to see you." "I'll think about it," I told her. And I have been thinking about it. Not because I want to reconcile with Blake or reopen old wounds with Celeste, but because some relationships are worth preserving despite the pain they've caused. My parents made mistakes, but they're still my parents. My father is still the man who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework and walked me to my first day of school. Maybe forgiveness doesn't always mean restoration. Maybe sometimes it just means letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison the rest of your life. I haven't made a decision yet about visiting home, but I know that whatever I decide, it will be based on what's best for the life I've built now, not on trying to fix or reclaim the life I lost. Ingrid and I are expecting our first child this spring, a boy, according to the ultrasound. We've already picked out a name, Eric, which means eternal ruler in Norwegian. I like the idea of giving him a name that represents strength and permanence, qualities I want him to have in his own life. Sometimes I wonder what I would say to my younger self, the man who walked into that baby shower 5 years ago and had his world turned upside down. I think I would tell him that the pain would pass, that the betrayal would eventually become just a story he tells, that he would find love again and it would be better than anything he'd lost. But mostly, I think I would tell him to trust his instincts. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. When someone breaks your trust, don't spend years trying to convince yourself it was an accident. And when life offers you a chance to start over, take it. Because sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing something you thought you couldn't live without. Sometimes the worst betrayal leads you to the greatest happiness. Sometimes you have to lose your old family to find your real one. I never became the man I thought I would be when I was 25 and planning a future with Celeste. But I became something better. A man who knows his own worth, who understands the difference between love and loyalty, who has built a life based on truth instead of wishful thinking. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. As I write this, I can hear Ingrid in the kitchen, humming while she makes dinner. In a few minutes, I'll close this laptop and join her, and we'll talk about our days and make plans for the weekend and dream about our son who's on the way. It's a simple life, but it's an honest one. And after everything I've been through, honesty is the most beautiful thing in the world. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel. So subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video, there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.